So now let's begin to explore HTML. So after this presentation, you'll be able to build a simple web page, and also you'll appreciate the use of an HTML editor. Here's some of the HTML elements we're going to look at. So first thing is HTML is defined by a particular group of people called the World Wide Web Consortium. So there is a particular place on the internet where you can go and you can see all the information about HTML. And I strongly recommend you don't go there, all right? Unless you're kind of expert, you're really already quite proficient in HTML. All of that detail there, because there's a lot of detail, is really too much. It's not about learning, it's about referring to the HTML standard. So this might be useful later after you build more HTML skills, but right now I would suggest don't go there. So let's look at HTML. HTML commands are called elements. Each element has a start tag and an end tag. So this is the paragraph element. There's the start of the paragraph, there's the end of the paragraph, and there's some text, which I haven't shown, in the middle of the paragraph. Okay, that's the usual structure, start, end, something in the middle. However, there are some exceptions which we'll look at later. So let's begin to make a web page. This is the basic structure of a web page. You have to have doctype HTML at the top, then you start your HTML element, and down the bottom you finish your HTML element, and then you have a head section, and then you have a body section. Okay, so this head section is basically some kinds of information which you don't see on the web page. The body section is more things that you actually see on the web page. So our first web page, there's the complete source code, and we've done the things that we saw on the last slide, and we've added a few extra things, a couple of extra things in the head section, a couple of extra things in the body section as well. This is what it looks like. My web page. Web page is so awesome. Very simple. That is the H1. That is the P that we saw, paragraph. So we saw H1, the top thing, and we saw P, the paragraph. So H1 is heading 1. Again, start tag, end tag, some text in the middle, basic structure of most HTML elements, and also paragraph, start paragraph, end paragraph, and then some text in the middle. Basic commands that you'll see on many web pages. Now, let's look for a few slides. Let's look at the head part. The stuff that we just talked about, H1 and paragraph, was in the body part. What about the head part? So basically, anything in the head part is information about the web page. Usually you don't actually see those things in the web page. So I had two things in my simple demonstration web page, and one was title and one was meta tag. Obvious what they do, title tells the browser what the title is of the web page, and the meta tag obviously tells the browser the author. So pretty simple, high level information about the web page goes in the head part. Other things you might find in the head part, you might see a style instruction. We'll talk about style a bit later. You might see a link to a style sheet, which is a separate file containing style information. You might see other types of meta information, maybe description, keywords, maybe character set. Lots of different types of meta information you might see in a web page head section. Other things you might see, a piece of JavaScript code, that might be in the head. A link to a file which has JavaScript code. JavaScript, we talk about that later. Okay? You might see a base instruction, and that's basically saying you have a website, a whole group of web pages, where are they going? Where do they belong? And it tells the browser where they belong. So quite a lot of things that you might see in the head section. So we've got lots of elements in HTML, and some of them have attributes, parameters, if you like. So there's one attribute, another attribute for the meta element. So you can use speech marks, double speech marks, if you like, and there's double speech marks. But also, if you want, you could use single speech marks. Okay, both of them are fine. The browser doesn't care which one you use. So let's begin to learn HTML a bit more. Different ways of learning. One way is to look at the source code of any web page. So here's an example, Wikipedia web page, a website which has lots of general information, encyclopedia information about millions of things around the world. Go to that in your web browser and hit the keyboard shortcut such as Ctrl-U on a PC or some other shortcuts on a Mac, and you will see the source code. And perhaps we'll have a quick look at that right now. So for example, this is the website for Wikipedia. I'd like to learn the HTML from this website. So I'm going to go over to my computer and do Ctrl-U, because this is a PC, and just have a quick look at the HTML code. All right, so this is the source code for the Wikipedia website. I can see things I already know about, doctype HTML, start HTML, the head section, begins, meta tags, titles, all of these things. A lot of them I know already, even though I just began to look at HTML, but some things I don't know. We can't cover everything in this series of videos. For example, HTML, it can have a language attribute. This particular web page is in English language. Okay, we don't have time to look at all of these attributes. You can learn them by looking at websites and looking at the source code of different websites. So here's a header section. If I keep going down, I'll see the body section. I can learn a lot of things by looking at this kind of website. Okay, another way to learn HTML is to look at different HTML editors. All right, there's hundreds of editors, many. Do a quick Google search and you'll find a big long list. So they give you a nice GUI environment, a nice graphical user interface so that you can build HTML, and you can also see the source code that they create. So these editors, they're useful sometimes, especially useful for complementing learning. That's not replacing learning, but complementing your learning of HTML. Let's look at an example. So here's an HTML editor. This one is called TinyMCE, and it actually works inside a web page because this is actually a web page. Okay, and so let's do a quick example. I'm going to type some text here in my little GUI environment, and then I'm going to apply some formatting. I'm going to apply the H1 format. All right, so I'm going to type some text. It's going to be very small. You won't see it very clearly. And then I'm going to add the H1 style, and then you'll see it a little bit bigger, and we can see the source code. So let's do some typing. This is my web page, something like that. Extremely small, you can't really see it. Let's select it and then apply a format, and we're talking about the H1 format. And yes, now we can see that we have a large size of text that is using the head H1 tag. Now, what about my source code? I want to look at the code created by the editor so I can copy it, paste it into my own system. So let's have a look at the source code, and I can access that with this particular menu. So let's click and look at the source code and make it a bit larger so you can see it. And there is my source code. Fantastic. I didn't have to type it myself. H1, this is my web page /H1. I could copy that, put it in my own web page, put it in my own web system if I like. Of course, it's not just the simple things like H1. There's 100 different things you could do with editors, and they'll construct the source code, and then you copy it and paste it. Does it replace learning? No, it doesn't really replace learning. You still have to understand everything it generates. Okay? So that's the end of our first discussion about HTML.